Hello everyone, Ember here, and welcome back to a new video. In this one I'm going to be taking a look at the set Cyber Judge, which is going to be part 2 of Temporal Forces. So if you'd like to see the set review for Wild Force, I'll try and remember to leave a link in the description. But aside from that, we can just get stuck in. So we have Scyther, which is kind of relevant because it does foreshadow Scissor EX later on in the video, but it's just exists, it's there. We also have a Pinaco, which again, I guess there's a fortress later on. I don't actually remember there being a fortress in this set, but I guess there is one. Then we have a C Dot, which has 60 HP, so less than 70, so we can use Buddy Buddy Poffin, which is good. Then we have Nuzleaf, nothing interesting there. Unfortunately, this shift tree isn't that good. It says choose 3 of your opponent's bench Pokemon, shuffle all of the other opponent's bench Pokemon into their deck. So typically this is only going to be choosing like 2 Pokemon to shuffle back in, which just isn't that good. And yeah, so if your opponent just clogs up the bench with a bunch of stuff, then more likely than not, then, it's a bit meh, which is a shame, but yeah. We have Shroomish, which is a Shroomish. Then we have a Breloom, which is got the actually very powerful attack Punch, which for 30 damage says your opponent is also knocked out, and then you get to call the judge. So yeah, that's a very powerful attack, but aside from that, then we have a Deerling and a Sourcebook. So Sourcebook has the ability Seasonal Change. Once in your turn, you may search your deck for a Stadium card, reveal it, and put it into your hand. So if we ever get a Stadium card that is super broken for whatever reason, and it needs to be searched out in that particular deck, then maybe Sourcebook could see play, but being a stage 1, finding a Stadium card just seems a bit underwhelming. If this was like a Stadium card and a basic energy, I could kind of get behind this card, but because you're just finding a Stadium and it's on a stage 1, yeah, doesn't seem very good, unfortunately. Then we have a Grubbin, which again is a Pokemon that will evolve into something later on. Then we have Dum Eyes with Steel Anchor for 2 grass and a colorless, does 80 damage, and if you have any benched metal Pokemon, it does 160 instead. So pretty efficient as long as you can actually ramp the grass energy on there. The best way, to be honest, is going to be with Lost Zone, unfortunately. So if you don't care about Lost Zone, then this is going to be a bit boring for you. But basically, you already play Zamazenta in Lost Zone and potentially the new Iron Treads that's coming out shortly. So there is every potential for this to be a nice just grass swinger into stuff like Charizard, but even then you're still only doing 320 and not actually KOing Charizard in one hit because it has 330. So that's kind of annoying, and I kind of wish Dum Eyes did a little bit more damage in that sense, but Pokemon are just going through a phase of printing big, powerful basics that do 160 on a weird specific condition, which is a bit strange to me because it doesn't KO, relevant stage 2EX Pokemon, but, it is what it is. Then we have Bramblin, which is got some quite nice Van Gogh-esque style artwork there. We've got Bramble Gast with the ability Weed Spirit, which is a fantastic name for an ability. For each prize card your opponent has taken, this Pokemon gets plus 50 HP, which is quite funny. And then the attack, Powerful Needles, does 80 damage. Well, if you flip a coin for each energy attached to Bramble Gast, and you do 80 damage for each heads. So it's a massive shame that Cham from Battle Styles is rotating when this releases. I think it's like a few days period or something between rotation, which is a mighty shame because this could have been such a fun meme deck to try out. I mean, you could still probably try it out with something, but I'm not sure how you would go about ramping the energy. You could use Xatu in theory, but then you'd have to run like a split of grass and psych energy. Could probably get very, very weird quickly. But yeah, plus 50 HP for each prize card your opponent's taken is at least fun to mess around with. If your opponent's taken 2 prize cards, then this thing has 200 HP, which isn't terrible, to be honest. Then, of course, late game, this thing's going to have 300, 350 HP, which is very funny. So, yeah, I think Bramble Gast could be quite amusing, potentially even with the Hero's Cape to get plus 100 HP as the ace spec. So, yeah, could be a bit of a fun meme deck to try out at the very least. Then we have a Reor and a Rabasca. Rabasca does prevent all damage and effective attacks done to your benched Pokemon, which is quite nice. It just means that if we don't see any more bench protection and Manaphy rotates, then, it might be worth picking up just a 1-1 line of this in case they don't decide to reprint Bench Barrier on a basic. So, yeah, I would just bear that in mind and, pick up a 1-1 line while this is still pretty cheap. But, yeah, because it's probably going to cost nothing. It's like a 20p kind of card. So, yeah, then we have Iron Leaves EX, which unfortunately continues the trend of underwhelming grass-type EX Pokemon. 220 HP, the ability Rapid Veneer, which in theory is okay, but you have to get the grass energy into play regardless, and then you have to have a reason to use Prismatic Edge, which is doing 180. So I think realistically this is an okay answer to Charizard in a Giratina Arceus style deck, but even then, Giratina can also use the new A-Spec Maxime Belt to do plus 50, so you'll be able to KO Charizard with Lost Impact. So I think that's probably just a far better option than whatever this is, because this is just not really doing enough damage in my opinion. Like, you could use future stuff to ramp up the damage, but you still have to get the energy on the board in the first place, then you have to keep the energy in play because this is probably not surviving more than one hit, so yeah, sadly, I don't think Iron Leaves is very good. Bit of a shame, but yeah, not very good. Then we have a Slugma. Always nice to see new Slugmas and Macargos. Has the ability Lava Pools, which sadly isn't very good, but it's just if your opponent moves from the bench to active, the new active Pokemon gets burned. So maybe in GLC, this could be quite fun in a burn-style toolbox deck. Or maybe, you know, it could be a good partner for the Scorch, which I believed we looked at in the last video, if it's not in this one. Yeah, so Scorch was in Wild Force, does 180, but only if your opponent is burned for 2 energy, which isn't too bad. So there is like ways of making this work as like a fun, cheap budget deck to play, just for players starting up with getting into the game and whatnot. But aside from that, it's not going to be very good, which is a bit of a shame again, because, you know, the artwork is fantastic. But yeah, bit of a shame. Then we have Victini, which I think is okay. Discarding a special energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. That has been pretty good in the past, to be fair, on stuff like Derail Yveltal. But it also is that I think that Yveltal was also a pivot or something in that deck. This has a retreat cost of 1, which is kind of frustrating. Flippity Flap is quite handy to have in certain situations, but yeah, sadly, I think this is more of a maybe not even a GLC card, just kind of a meh card, really. Yeah, bit of a bulk card. Then we have some Littens and Torracats. Just bear in mind there is really good Littens and Torracats from Silver Tempest. Then we have Incineroar EX, which has kind of divided a lot of people on whether or not this card is any good at all. But it has the ability Adversity Act, which basically decreases this attack cost by 1 colorless for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So Blazing Bomb would be doing 240 for 5 energy plus burn, so technically 260. But it is for 5 energy, but thanks to the ability, assuming there's no ability stopping Pokemon in play, I guess, then, you know, this could be used for potentially 1, maybe 2 energy most of the time. So hyper efficient damage, hyper efficient ability. Does rely on the opponent just not really caring about this, though, and sort of just managing their bench really well, because, you know, if your opponent is able to manage their bench, then they're going to get around this. But at the same time, most decks can't really afford not to bench and, you know, just overbench basically all half the time. So I do think there is some decent potential for this card, definitely as a rogue deck at the very least. Unfortunately, it's probably better off as like a partner for something else, but being a stage 2, that's obviously going to be quite clunky and difficult to pull off. But either way, I think it's a very interesting card and definitely worth experimenting with. Next up is we have a Pikachu and a Raichu. Raichu is kind of interesting actually. Winding Bolt does 50 damage to each Pokemon in play with damage counters on them. So that is quite important because it refers to your Pokemon as well as your opponent's. So if your opponent has been damaging your Pokemon throughout the game, then you'll hurt yourself, which kind of sucks. But if you're playing like a spread deck, you know, this with Miss Magius or something, then it could be pretty good, because Miss Magius is already kind of efficient anyway at spreading damage counters. I don't know how good that will be, you know, 2 different stage 1s, all the rest of it, but yeah, I think Raichu has some decent potential in some sort of spread deck, maybe even in a lightning spread deck in GLC potentially. So yeah, could be cool. Then we have Electrive with the attack Short Circuit. This is a really strange card. I feel like this should have come out like sets and sets ago when Palkia was really good, but Short Circuit Knuckle for 2 colors does 40 damage. If your opponent has any water Pokemon in play, this attack does 120 more. So it's supposed to capitalize on the fact that, you know, Radiant Greninja is in so many decks and whatnot, but your opponent, if they see you benching an Electabuzz, they're just not going to play down Radiant Greninja. I mean, that sounds very, very annoying, but either way, it's just not a lot of damage at the end of the day, and you have to get the 2 colors from somewhere, you know, either with generators or with Xatu, Baxcalibur. I'm trying not to sound like a pessimist here, but, you know, it's just a bit too awkward to make work, I think, which is a bit of a shame. Next up, though, is we have Viavolt, which is going to be a very, very fun rogue deck to play. Serial Cannon for 2 lightning energy does 120, and then 80 more for each of your bench Charger Bug. So thankfully you don't have to discard them, you just do 80 more for each one in play. So assuming you probably use stuff like TM Evolution to help get loads of Charge Bugs into play, then theoretically you should be able to at least do 280, hopefully. Or around, yeah, how much damage are we doing? Yeah, 200. So 200 or 280 most of the time, which honestly isn't terrible damage for a single prizer. Of course, you are a stage 2 requiring 2 energy, so you have to use generators and maybe even energy sticker to help pay for that attack cost, which is frustrating. However, I still think this could be quite fun as a rogue deck. Then we have another Zeraora because that's the Pokemon that needed more cards. Then we have Iron Thorns with the attack Destro Press, I think it's called Destro Press, yeah. For Lightning Colors, reveal the top 5 cards of your deck. This attack does 70 damage for each future card you find there. You discard the future cards and shuffle the other cards back into your deck. So, quite a fun card to use. It's definitely Guzzlord in theme, you know, those kind of what was it? Sandaconda, I think, was one of the more recent ones. Sandaconda, Kingdra. I think there's another one. Gyarados. Yeah, Gyarados from Sun and Moon. So, yeah, very fun style of attacker to use. And it is on a basic. You know, most of those guys were stage 1s. This is a basic. So that's cool. Could also be paired up with the Iron Crown to do plus 20 damage. There's also, of course, generators to get this thing going. You could even use Iron Valiant if you really wanted to, because you probably have to play a bunch of future cards anyway. There is a Maridon later on that will accelerate some energy to your benched future Pokemon, so you could pair it up with that if you really wanted to. So yeah, could be quite a fun meme deck to try out. Probably nothing crazy, you know, definitely a fun deck to take to locals or your local league cup even, if you're feeling bold. But yeah, Iron Thorns could definitely see that being a very fun deck. Then we have Mr. Mime, which is basically a theme deck Pokemon. Giraffe Rig, which exists. We have a Cutiefly, which is fine, and a Ribombee. Business wages. I think that's the pun they were going for there. 1 colorless, 30 damage. If a defending Pokemon is KO'd during your next turn, take 2 more prize cards. I think this is pure bait, and I'll say this. I'll only say this once. I think this is pure bait because 30 damage does set up some KOs, but the fact that it has to be the defending Pokemon, not just any of your opponent's Pokemon, and you have to, you know, obviously KO that Pokemon as well. You have to be able to finish it off after doing the 30 damage. Yeah, it's a bit of a shame. And even though it has free retreat, unlike the translation here, it is a 0 retreat cost, and so make for a nice pivot throughout the game, which is nice. But yeah, I don't think Ribombee is very good, sadly, which is a shame. But then we have Iron Valiant, which says if you played a future support card from your hand during this turn, this attack does 100 more damage. 200 is quite a lot, not going to lie. 200 is a lot, especially when we have Future Boost Capsule to do plus 20. Then we have, of course, Iron Crown for another plus 20, which just so happens to be down here. So, yeah, I think Majesty Sword honestly isn't the worst attack. You know, you can get around this effect as well by playing Codebreaker, I think it is. Codebreaker is a future supporter. It allows you to search your deck for 2 cards, put them on top of your deck in any order. You know, good synergy with Xatu, potentially. Just an idea for a single prize deck. Then we have Iron Crown EX, which is the major talking point for a lot of people. You know, this is definitely one of those cards that's probably going to be very expensive upon release. I doubt it will be very cheap. Has the ability Cobalt Commander, says your future Pokemon's attacks, excluding any Iron Crowns, so not just this one, your other ones as well, do 20 more damage to your opponent's active. And then Twin Shuttles does 50 to 2, and it will go through any effects. This is a good card. It's a very good card. Plus 20 damage is just a fantastic buff to have on the bench. It is an EX Pokemon, of course, which is a problem, but that never stopped Mew VMAX and Genesect, so yeah. I do think this card will see a whole bunch of play. It's very, very good. It's definitely one of the better abilities we've seen recently, it's just because it's a flat damage modifier, but yeah, very, very scary card for future decks. Then we have a Mediacham, which I don't know why they do this. You know, they go to the trouble of getting cool artwork and then they just give it the most boring, mediocre attacks ever. It's kind of fun if you know someone who likes Mediacham or something and they collect them, and you know you have a younger brother or sibling who just likes to play with easier cards and whatnot. But yeah, just a bad card overall. Then we have a Dribble with the ability Dig Out, which says when you bench it, you can search your deck for 3 basic fighting energy and discard them. A very cool ability for Garchomp EX, which is definitely what you'd want to pair this up with. Would you play more than 1 or 2 of these? Probably not, especially since Excadrill has 0 synergy with this ability, which I think is a bit weird, like why not, give Excadrill an attack that does more damage for each fighting energy in your discard pile or something? Just make an effort, Pokemon, to do interesting things more often, but yeah, it's a bit of a shame, but Drillbur's ability will be a nice buff to Garchomp, so can't really complain because I like Drillbur and I like Garchomp, so yeah, that's cool. But yeah, Excadrill, sadly, as we've just mentioned, isn't very good. You could make this work as a meme deck, but 180 just, not enough really, so Drillbur. Drillbur's better than the Excadrill, which is sad. Then we have Aron Boulder, which is basically the worst EX Pokemon, like one of the worst EX Pokemon, which is a bit of a shame because it's not complete garbage, but it's just severely outclassed by so many better cards at this point. Repulsor Axe does 60, and if it takes any damage next turn, put 80 damage on the attacking Pokemon. So this 60, of course, can be modified quite heavily with Iron Crowns and Future Booster. Future Booster, not Future Booster, whatever that is. But yeah, I think this card could be quite fun as a rogue deck, but sadly it's not going to be, a very viable deck, which is a shame. Then we have Giraffe, which might see a bit more play as a style of Whimsicott deck, maybe, like a quad deck, if those are familiar with Whimsicott V-Star. Has the ability Armor Tail, prevent all damage done to Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's basic EX. So Roaring Moon won't be able to use its second attack, which is quite cool. Also means that Iron Valiant and Iron Crowns can't swing into you. They have to find a basic single price attacker, which, to be fair, most decks do have one these days, but this ability is still pretty annoying to get through, especially in the right matchups. And then Sneaky Beam, for 1 Psychic and 2 colors, does 160, and then a 30 Snipe, which is always nice to have, even with Manaphy around. So yeah, pretty average card. 260 HP is definitely a bit of a letdown because it's stage 1, but still 160, decent damage. You could use stuff like Xatu, so yeah, definitely doesn't seem terrible. Could be decent, Then we have Fortress, which is truly one of the cards that exists, which is a shame because I like the artwork. Again, the artwork's cool in this set, but yeah, bit of a shame. Then we have Scizor EX, which is at least worth talking about. So Steel Wing for 2 colors does 70 damage. During your opponent's next turn, this Pokemon takes 50 less damage from attacks, which is worth mentioning because there is a Stadium reprint of Steel Shelter in this set, which basically just says metal Pokemon take minus 30 from attacks. So yeah, minus 80, I guess. That's cool. Also, Crossbreaker, discard 2 metal energy from Scizor EX. So you could like stack 3 or 4 energy on this with like the Metang. I think it's Metang. I think it's just down here actually. Yeah. So this Metang would be a way of accelerating some energy to Scizor. So as long as you had at least 2 or 3 every turn, then you would be able to consistently swing for 240, which is pretty decent, and you don't really mind discarding energy sometimes because you're probably going to get KO'd anyway, theoretically. So yeah, I think this could be quite fun. There's also that single price Scizor from City in Flames, one that does 10 damage plus 50 for each ability your opponent has in play. Could be quite hard Charizard counter if you struggle with weakness. So yeah, I definitely think this card has at least some potential. Then we have Mawile, which exists. Then we have Beldum, which also exists. Then we have the Metang, which we just talked about. So yeah, look at top 4. What's cool about this Metang is that you can use it turn in, turn out. It's not just like a when you evolve it kind of ability. It's just every single turn you can do this, which is, it's fantastic. So yeah, I do expect to see this card see at least some play in some form. It might be a bit too slow for Dialga. Just saying, it might be a little bit too slow for that deck, but yeah, could still try it out at the very least. Then we have Metagross, which is, I don't want to admit it, but the Metang is definitely better than the Metagross, which is a shame. I definitely think we'll get a Metagross EX though, at the very least. But yeah, Metagross, not very good, sadly. It's a bit of a shame, but yeah. Then we have Meltang, which exists. We have Melmetal, which can do 230 damage. That's how crazy the power creep has gone for 5 energy, but yeah, this card will never see play. This card will never see play, which is a bit of a shame, right? Because 230 sounds like an awful lot of damage, because it is, but for 5 energy rather, yeah, just no. Then we have Iron Treads, which is kind of a decent option. It's unfortunately outclassed a bit by this Maridon down here, because they essentially do a similar thing. But this one has the ability Dual Core, so if it has a future booster capsule, it is both fighting and metal, which is very cool. And also that capsule will give this thing free retreat plus 20 damage. And then Passing Wheel does 60 or 80 if modified. Then you can move 1 energy from this Pokemon to one of your benched. So yeah, that's quite nice. You have doing decent base damage. You can potentially KO some low HP Pokemon as well in the early game. Seems pretty solid. However, Maridon also does the same thing, really. And you can also search your deck for 2 basic energy, which is significantly better than trying to attach 2 energy to use Iron Treads. So yeah, Maridon I think is just a bit better. Also, Maridon has a really good second attack that is 160 for 3, which is very efficient. So yeah, definitely think this Maridon is better than Iron Treads, which is a bit of a shame, but yeah. Then we have Lickitung, which can find Pokemon from your opponent's hand and put them onto the bench, which is nice to have in control. Then we have Licky Licky, which exists. Then we have Skitty, which exists. Then we have Delcatty, which exists. Then we have Pidove, which has the ability Emergency Evolution. Once in your turn, if this Pokemon's HP is 30 or less, so you could just use Gapejaw Bog, by the way, to automatically get you down to 30 HP, which is nice. You may search your deck for an Unfezant or Unfezant EX and put it onto this Pokemon to evolve it, and then shuffle your deck. So what's really cool about this ability is that it doesn't specify that you can't use it on the first turn of the game. So you could, in theory, if you were pretty crafty and pretty clever, you could, in theory, get this going turn 1. Or get this going like turn 1 going second, potentially, and then swing with Unfezant. Now, I don't think there's really a great way of doing this, because you could pay for Reverse Wind with Neo Upper Energy, and then at that point you would be still doing 70 and not, 50 with Double Turbo. Just an idea. It's just a thought, right? It's just an idea. Still, it does mention Unfezant EX in the ability, so potentially we could see an Unfezant EX in the next set. That would be pretty cool if we did, but yeah, very strong ability regardless. Unfezant isn't super strong, but just because the ability is that good, I would definitely consider looking at Unfezants and future Unfezants. So yeah, seems pretty cool. Then we have a Drampa, which has some fantastic artwork, but is sadly a bit meh. If all of your bench Pokemon have at least 1 damage counter on them, this attack does 220 instead. So bit of a steep requirement. You do have to get 3 energy on there somehow, so I think Xatu Gapejaw Bog is probably your best bet with this card if you want to try and make it work. But yeah, 220 is a lot, to be fair. It is a lot of damage, but you still have to get them all damaged somehow, so yeah. And we'll quickly skim over these trainers. I think we've talked about these more than enough in other videos. But I guess like the main highlights are Hand Clippers is really good in control and against control when they build up massive hand sizes. Prime Catcher, I'm sure you've heard more than enough about this card, but yeah, very, very broken. Reboot Pod, I think it's called. Yeah, Reboot Pod will be a decent option in Iron Crowns decks. It just means that you can play 3 or 4 Iron Crowns onto the bench without worrying about, accelerating energy with Xatu and stuff. So do like the idea of Reboot Pod in those decks. Hero's Cape, I think, is better than people give it credit for, just because plus 100 HP is monstrous in some situations. Like Torterra having 340 already. You give it this, it's now at 440. Kricketune takes it to 480. Yeah, definitely kind of crazy there, but Hero's Cape definitely could be fun. Booster Capsule reprint, because why not? And then Heavy Baton, which I don't think this card is terrible, but at the same time, there's just so few options for this to be attached to that I don't think it's going to be more than a niche card, really. Then we have Cryptomaniac's Deciphering, or Codebreaker's Deciphering, I think it was called. Search your deck for 2 cards, shuffle your deck, and put those cards top of in any order. Fantastic, with Bibarel, Revroom, and Curlier, of course. So, oh yeah, and Xatu. So, yeah, pretty cool. Then we have Salvator, which is a pretty scary supporter, I can't lie. Search your deck for a Pokemon, except any Pokemon with abilities that evolve from one of your Pokemon in play, and put it onto that Pokemon to evolve it. You can use this card on a Pokemon that was put into play when setting up to play, or on the turn it was put into play. So that's quite scary. Very, very scary card. It's not as broken as Wally, of course, because Wally was just any Pokemon, but this is still worth, keeping an eye on for being kind of broken. Definitely need to keep an eye on that. But yeah, Bianca's Sincerity, heal or damage from one of your Pokemon with 30 or less HP remaining. It's a bit too niche, to be honest. I think this card's a bit too niche. You could make it work with Roaring Moon and Tisserina, I guess, or something. Against Tisserina, I should say. But yeah, it is an option, but yeah, not sure that it's a fantastic card. But yeah, it's cool to see. Then we have Full Metal Lab and Mist Energy. Full Metal Lab is the one that we said was like a reprint of the other Metal Stadium, the Steel Shelter one or something. Metal Pokemon take 30 less damage from attacks from your opponent's Pokemon, so definitely a Scizor EX card. And then Mist Energy, or actually with the Iron Shreds EX, I should say. And also Mist Energy here is just prevent all effects of attacks. So it's just like another Lugia buff, basically. There's also some secret rares, which I'll very quickly glance over. I'll leave a link to Pokebeach in the description if you want to take a look at these yourself. But yeah, I would say some crowning highlights include this Iron Crown EX. And where was he? Oh yeah, Balancanth. I just thought this Balancanth was really cute for some reason. But yeah, this has been Our Power. Hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what your favorite cards are down below. And yeah, thank you for watching.